Hey everyone, welcome back to Orthodox Family Life. I haven't done a live stream for a while, so I'm excited to be back here with you, give you a little bit of an update on my channel while we wait for people to hop in. If you do hop in, please say hi in chat. Always love to see who's here. We'll give it a few minutes before I get into the content we'll talk about today, which is the saints and confusion and when things are happening in the world. How do we kind of deal with that? Using the lives of the saints as a example and inspiration. So, just wanted to say glad to be back with you guys. It's been a while since I've had a live stream. So, I want to start with the homeschoolers out there who have been very patiently waiting for the next series on homeschooling. And forgive me, I haven't done that yet, but I haven't forgotten you and I hope to get back to that soon. But please, in the meantime, if you have any questions about homeschooling, you're welcome to drop them in the chat today, or you can reach out to me on Instagram or on YouTube. Let's see. We also, I want to thank everyone who's become a member recently. I think I have 5 whole members now, which has been pretty exciting. So thanks for your support. I try to make everything I do free and so that it can go to as many people as possible. But I really appreciate people who do support the channel because that's allowing me to upgrade some of my equipment and ways of processing things. So thanks to everyone who's done that. And finally, I recently held my first panel on why there are no women catechumens coming into the church, or very few women catechumens coming right now. And I think the panel went really well, but I'd love to hear your feedback. And I'd like to do more panels. So if there's something you'd like to see, um, there's something you'd like to hear a group of ladies talk about, let me know. I have some ideas, but I'd love to hear what you think as well. Hey, Punchy, good to see you. And Mano, great to see you. So it looks like people are finally here. So maybe we'll get started. Um, so July is my absolute favorite month for the saints. There's so many wonderful saints every month, but in July, it's some of my favorites. So you have St. John Maximovich, St. Christina, St. Markella, St. Mary Magdalene, St. Elizabeth Grand Duchess, St. Paisios, who's very beloved to our family. It's just a month full of saints, even though there's no feast day in the church. So I've been reading a lot of their lives this last month, and over and over and over, there were something in their life that I felt like I wanted to share with all of you, and I just didn't really have the time. So we're gonna have a little bit of maybe a marathon on the saints this morning, going over about 4 or 5 of them and some of the lessons we can draw from their lives because, people continue to struggle out there. It's a really difficult place to be in the modern world, and there's a lot of confusion, and we often just don't know how to deal with things, especially things that are, um, new, like AI is new. There's a lot of new problems in the world that we've never faced before. And so it can be easy to get distracted and not know how to deal with things. So I always try to go back to what the church says and what do the saints teach us. So we'll start with St. Christina. St. Christina, her feast day is today, I believe, on the old calendar, July 24th. This is actually my patron, and I didn't know a lot about St. Christina when I first converted. Back in the 90s, there wasn't a lot of information in English, and if there was, it was really difficult to find. You couldn't just look it up. So for many years, I didn't know about St. Christina or the details of her life. I knew she was an early martyr. But when you read her life, you're really struck by some of the details. And so I'll give a really brief account, but you can find the full account on my channel, which is truly amazing. So St. Christina lived in Tyre, which is on the edge of the Mediterranean on the eastern side. And her father was a pagan and also the governor of that area. She was very beautiful, so her father didn't want her to be out in public, so he built a tower and he put her there. And if any of you are in Father Turbo's private classes over at Synaxis of Wisdom, which I highly recommend, he mentioned the tower saints like St. Barbara and I can never say his right, but the king of India, who his father was also locked him in a tower to keep him away from things of the world. These tower saints kind of have a really interesting story. And this was St. Christina's life. She was put in a tower, she was given servants to care for her, and she was given idols to worship. And so slowly over time, she had a good disposition and she came to believe in the one true God because God enlightened her and she just observed the natural world and came to see that, you know, the idols are not real. There must be one God who created everything. And so because of her good disposition, uh, God and her prayer, she started praying to the one God. God sends her an angel who instructs her. So eventually her father comes and says, okay, it's time to go to the pagan festival. We're all going to worship together as a family. And she refuses. And of course, she's been locked in this tower. So the father can't figure out how she has learned about the Christian gospel. And he kind of mocks Christianity. They go through this whole back and forth. And eventually he tortures her. Um, Finally, he means to kill her by throwing her into the water with something tied around her neck. And before she goes into the water, she prays to the Lord that these waters would be the waters of her baptism. Because at this point, St. Christina has never met another Christian. She's been in the Tower of Lone, except for the angels, of course. And so she's completely cut off from the rest of the church. She hasn't even been baptized. So she's thrown into the water, and the angels come and bring her to the surface. And then Christ himself comes down and baptizes her, which is truly remarkable. I've never heard of this in any other saint's life before. Um, there's an icon that's on the thumbnail for the story of this, and it's just truly incredible that Christ reaches out to someone to that degree who is alone in the world, who longs to be part of the church and has no other way to do it. And I think you can see where I'm going with this. But I'll finish the story. She survives. Her father ends up reposing because of her prayers. She doesn't want her murder to be on him. She goes through suffering under two other leaders that are sent to the region after his repose. And eventually she is killed for the faith. Um, so when I was thinking about St. Christina, I thought, how encouraging is this for those of you who feel isolated from the church, who maybe have found orthodoxy online, who really desire to be part of the church, and you don't know how to make it happen. There's nothing around you. God finds these miraculous ways of joining those who love him to the church. And that might sound far-fetched, but she's not the only one that's happened to. Again, the King of India, this happened to him, which you can read about in The Pearl of Great Price put out by St. Anthony's Monastery or St. Barbara or others. God really will reach out and make a path for you. You just have to have faith. And if we only look to human logic and human reason of how can I make this happen, it's not going to work. God's answer is always more beautiful and miraculous than anything we could come up with. So that's St. Christina. So if you have any questions about her or thoughts, let me know. But I'm really grateful to have such a wonderful patron. And like I said, I didn't really know about her when I first converted, but I did keep her as my Christina as my given name, my birth name. So I didn't choose another saint. And it wasn't until many years later that I really saw the parallels in my own life with her, where someone did tell me about the church when I was very young, about 16. But then I only had that one interaction with the person. And in many ways, I was on this journey alone looking for the church. And I felt very much guided by God in that, where there's no one I can point to who I can say, this person brought me to the church. It doesn't exist for me. And yet God found this way of really directly intervening in my life and telling me to, go here, now do this. And so I think she's a wonderful saint for me. So if you're looking for a saint, sometimes, just keep praying to God and he'll send you someone that you can relate to. So that's St. Christina, remembered today on the old calendar, July 24th. And then 2 days before that, we have St Markella of Chios. Again, her full story is on my channel if you want to go listen to that. That one I'd be a little bit careful if you have children. It gets pretty graphic in a few ways. But St. Markella was in Greece on the island of Chios during the Turkish occupation of Greece. I'm not sure of the exact year, maybe 500s or 1700s, somewhere in there. And so she has a very pious mother. And the part that I tell of the story is really the interaction between her and her mother, which is very lovely. Her mother is dying, and she sort of gives her daughter um, this last will and testament of preparing her for her mother's death and what to do. And it's so gentle and so beautiful. It's a real model of how mothers and children can interact with each other. And so many of us maybe don't come from healthy homes, and we've never had a mother or a father talk to us like this. The lives of the saints are full of these interactions between pious mothers and their pious children. And it's so beautiful and encouraging. So that's enough right there in the story of St. Markella to to receive so much instruction and encouragement. But after her mother dies, she keeps house for her father. Um, he was never a very faithful man, and after the death of his wife, he went downhill. And unfortunately, he began to have a lot of really unnatural um, sexual desires for his daughter. This is why I don't read the full life on my channel, because some people are playing these lives for their children. So I try to always warn you if there's something amiss there that the children shouldn't hear. But this starts to happen. And so once she realizes it, she's pretty horrified. It kind of culminates in St. Markella having to literally flee from her father, who's so overcome with passion. He's chasing her on horseback. There's a whole chase through, towards the mountains and then back down to the water. Um, and eventually he shoots her with a bow and arrow in the thigh, and she can no longer run. And it's this really terrible moment where she's crying out to God with so much pain, asking him to help her in this moment that she can no longer run, but please don't let her be defiled, especially by her father. And again, in that moment where everything seems lost and there seems like no hope, the rocks, this is a rocky shoreline, the rocks themselves open up and receive her body up to her shoulders, I believe. Um, and the father is so angered by this, he comes and he beheads her, and she loses her life for the faith and for the sake of piety and purity. And so it's a really hard story to hear. It's obviously very graphic, but um, I think this is such a beautiful story for our day, where we are overcome with unnatural sexual passions in our culture, right? And this is something that St. Markella had to deal with, and she dealt with it with such purity and trying to honor her father until she realized what was really going on with him. And then she had to lay aside that relationship and not worry about offending him, but just doing what was obviously right. And she did everything in her power she could to protect herself. And then when that ran out, then God intervened and helped her. And so I think even though it's a very difficult story to hear, the life of St. Markella is incredibly instructive. And on that spot now, still in Chios, on the island of Chios, the rocks there are stained red, and on certain feast days, a little steam will come out right in the spot um, where she was martyred, and her relics still lay underneath, right there. Hey, Moldy. Good morning. Just getting started here. So the other thing about St. Markella is that she's a great model for women whose husbands are maybe very difficult and not, he was a Greek Christian, but he wasn't living the Christian life. So in the beginning of the story, you really see how St. Markella's mother deals with that situation. So again, today's kind of theme is the saints are instructive for us in a multitude of ways of inspiration and encouragement. So, so the next one is the Holy Seven Sleepers of Ephesus. Now, have you guys heard of these before? I know there's a lot of jokes from people who love to sleep in late, saying this is their patron, the seven Holy Sleepers of Ephesus. And I believe their feast day was just 2 days ago on the new calendar. So this story will take a little longer to tell, but we're going to change gears here a little bit. Yesterday, I was listening to a couple things online, and I know it's a real temptation in these days where we have a lot of things in the churches that are in the church that are problematic, different heresies we're worried about, or practices, or things that we see that are not right. And there's a lot of talk about the laity need to stand up and fight this. And I think there's some truth in that. But again, I always try to go back to what did the saints say and what can we learn from the difficult situations that the church has already been through, because there's always been difficult situations in the church. What can we learn from the people that came before us? And so this story of the Holy Seven Sleepers of Ephesus, I think, shows that in a really beautiful way. So these seven holy young men were in Ephesus in, I think, about 250, 251, when the world was still pagan. Hey, Rip, good to see you. Thanks for being here. So they were young men who refused to sacrifice to the idols. There was I believe, a chase for them. They end up hiding out in a cave in Ephesus. And so eventually they're found, and the way they are martyred is that the cave is just sealed. And so they are locked inside of this cave. Two secret Christians see this happen, end up writing down all of their names, and kind of conceal it inside the wall that is being built. And so, so that when they're found eventually, people will know who they are. So fast forward about 200 years. The world is now Christian in this area, and there is a debate raging on whether or not we have a bodily resurrection, whether or not there is a general resurrection of the dead. And I want to read to you just one little paragraph from this, from the Big Lies of the Saints here. And this is about the bishop who was bishop at that time, because the church was being torn apart by this question. And so it says, following these events, 194 years had elapsed. The year was 445, 446, the 38th year of the reign of the pious Theodosius II, emperor of the Romani. During his reign, paganism was largely extinct, but it was still a time of numerous heresies, often initiated by those only nominally converted. The problem not only affected the bishops, but the emperor himself. Theodosius felt that it was his God-given duty to lead the people to the truth. Thus, when there arose a heresy denying the orthodox teaching of the general resurrection, he attempted to deal with it directly, but people kept being led astray from right belief. Some were believing that no man born of a woman could ever be raised from the dead for his final judgment. There were heretics who denied that there would be a general resurrection of the dead at the second coming of our Lord Jesus Christ. Some of them propounded, how can there be a resurrection of the dead when there will be neither soul nor body, since they have disintegrated? Others put forward that the souls alone will have a resurrection, since it would be impossible for bodies to arise and live after 1,000 years, when even their dust would not remain. Theodosius, perceiving the agitation created in the Church of God due to these impious distortions, was at a loss of what to do. There were even some bishops who succumbed to the confusion. Theodosius girded himself with a hair shirt and sat on the ground, lamenting. He tearfully besought the Lord to reveal the manner in which such a heresy could be brought to an end. The Lord did not look askance at his tears, but he hearkened to him. The Lord would reveal the mystery of the resurrection of the dead, of the future life, through his 7 saints. So I think that was a really important paragraph to think about before we go on with the story, because this is the emperor himself. He is actually responsible for, good order in the nation, and the bishops themselves, right? They've tried all they can do to put down this heresy. It's not working. They're at a loss. And so what do? They turn to God. He turns to God in prayer, and in a hair shirt, which is a penitential thing. And I think if we think about how we deal with some of the heresies and the problems in the church now, what do? We get on YouTube and we make a video about it, or we maybe say bad things about bishops that we don't even know, or situations we don't have all the details about. This is a really dangerous thing that I think we need to watch out. And I'm not saying that there isn't a time to speak the truth, but having been through a really difficult situation where our church split in two and it was very public, about 30 years ago, in retrospect, I now see that there were a lot of things that I didn't know, and I was in that situation. So we have to be really careful. We have to be very careful not to judge and criticize others especially those in authority. But when we see that something is not right in the church, like this good Theodosius II, he did all he could to change it, but then he turned to God in prayer and asked God to help. And God does, and in a most miraculous way, in a way that could not be refuted, which was um, a person who lived near the cave where the seven holy sleepers were, wanted to expand and make a shed or something out of it for his animals. So he takes the wall down and he finds these young men. And in the process, one of them wakes up. They go into the market. He thinks that he's just woken up from sleep. He doesn't realize he's actually been resurrected from the dead. He goes to the market and he realizes everything is different. It is Ephesus, but it's so much different than what he remembered. He goes to buy bread. His money has the old pagan emperor on it. It's not the current money they're using. This starts a big conversation. People can't figure out who he is. And eventually, what happens is the bishop and the magistrate and all the people go to the cave with him. And there, the truth is revealed that these are the seven holy sleepers of Ephesus, and they had been resurrected from the dead. And this miracle that God brings about puts to rest all of these heresies about whether or not we have a bodily resurrection, whether or not we are all resurrected at the end of time. And so while the good bishop and the good leaders of the church did everything they could, sometimes it takes this divine intervention. So we should never lose hope. This isn't the only story of this kind of divine intervention in church life when things are difficult and it's hard and it feels like the whole church is falling away. This has happened many times in the life of the church. Um, but when God intervenes, this completely puts it to rest. You guys are being really quiet in the chat today, so let me know if any of this is resonating with you or making sense. But it's easy to despair. It's easy to think that we are the drivers of all of this, that we have to fix the church. And ultimately, this is not true. This is Christ's church. It's Christ himself who purifies and who keeps the church on track. It's not us. All we can do is handle our own little footprint, our own little soul. So there's another really wonderful story that I think illustrates this, and that is with the great martyr Euphemia. Probably comes as a surprise that I can do it. Yeah. If anyone could, Moldy, it would be you. But this great martyr Euphemia, you can read about her life. But she actually intervenes twice in history when the church is under um, a lot of trouble with heresies. And of course, most of you probably know the story of the Council of Chalcedon in 451. This is where we have a split with the Oriental Orthodox Church, and there is some with the Monophysite heresy, and there's a lot of discussion going on about this, right? And so at the council, they end up praying to St. Euphemia, and they have her relics there. And so at some point, they decide to take a statement of faith from the Orthodox and then from the Monophysite. I'm not sure if this was actually the creed or if it was some other statement, so forgive me, I don't remember the details. But they decide to put both of them in her reliquary, a large ornate coffin, and seal it, spend the night in prayer. And they're asking God to divinely, show them what is the truth. And so they do this. And in the morning, when they open up her relics, in her right hand, she's holding the scroll of the Orthodox, and under her feet is the scroll of the heretics. And again, debating and arguing and trying to do the right thing, even if it's all meant in good faith, can only get us so far. Ultimately, God has to step in and sort these things out. These things are too big for us. And so St. Euphemia, through her prayers, helped in that moment. But she also helped back in the probably 70s, 80s, 90s. I'm not sure of the exact date, but at some point, St. Paisios the Athonite, who reposed in 91, I believe, he was concerned about all of the things going on in the church in Greece, right? Hey, Mano, good to have you back. We just talked about St. Euphemia and her at the Council of Chalcedon, but now she intercedes again in church affairs when St. Paisios is concerned about problems in the church, he begins to pray to her for help, maybe because she had already done this miracle at Chalcedon. So she appears to him, and they sit and they discuss these church matters, and she explains to him the Orthodox teaching, the Orthodox way to handle this. Um, After that is more of the famous part of the conversation where when he asked her, um, "How did you survive such great martyrdom? How did you survive all of this pain?" And she says something to the effect of, "If I would have known the joys of paradise, I would have suffered 1,000 martyrdoms. Like, the joy in paradise is nothing compared to the pain of martyrdom." But again, I think you can see in this moment that God sends her to help the church. So I think it's really important that those of us in the church now who are worried, rightly worried about different things in the church creeping into the church, that we're not overcome with sadness or anger or frustration or think that we're going to drive it all out. We just do our part, which is prayer and fasting and asking God to drive all this out. And He will, because He's done it so many times in the past. So again, I just want to encourage everyone to be, careful about how we talk about our hierarchy in particular, or different jurisdictions. We're going to be held accountable for all these words. And I know that there are difficult situations, and sometimes it is the right thing to say something, but we have to remember we're going to stand before God and make an account for what we said. I have to make an account for what I said during that whole time when our church split. It was really painful, and there was a lot of passion on both sides, a lot of sin on both sides. And that's something I've had to repent of for 30 years and think about. So if we really want to heal the church, we have to heal ourselves first. And then, like the good bishop or the good emperor in our story from the Holy Seven Sleepers of Ephesus, we have to actually pray to God. Like, how often do you pray for these bishops that you think are teaching heresy? That may very well be teaching heresy. How often have you prayed for them? Have you put on your hair shirt and prayed with tears that God would enlighten them? If we're not doing that, then maybe we shouldn't be saying things online. Um, I'll tell you a little story. This might sound unrelated, but many years ago, my children got into bird watching, and there was these beautiful little golden finches that are just lovely, and the food that they eat is a thistle, and so we got a little thistle bird seed, uh, bird feeder, and we would sit there and watch these little golden birds all day long. It was really lovely. So I ended up buying one for my mother-in-law, and I think about a year later, she kind of told me, "Well, we had to take it down because the seeds actually sprung up," right? This has been 20 years. Well, I have to admit that now in our neighborhood, I see thistle popping up, and I have to wonder, was this from that little bag, that little bird feeder that I gave my mother-in-law 20 years ago? I have no idea. But my point here is that sometimes we say a little word and we don't see the impact of that little word, or that word goes to somebody and it stirs up their passions, and it goes to a couple, they say something, it goes to somebody else and somebody else. And just like that little bit of seed can all of a sudden start popping up everywhere, so can our words. And so that's why we have to be so careful about what we say. If we are criticizing some bishop, you never know who is hearing that, who is taking that, who is repeating it in other places that makes it possibly sound worse. So we just all have to be very careful and responsible in what we say. And if we really want the church to be healed, we should be praying for that. So I guess I'm just saying, maybe pray before we speak. And I say this first of all to myself, because as I said, I'm the first who runs my mouth when I shouldn't. So Moldy says it's even more so when dealing with children, as they are more sensitive to our actions. Absolutely. Hey, good morning, Aisha. Nice to see you. I saw your comment the other day. So great to be here. Um, anyway, that's all I have for you guys today. I just wanted to touch base and say I'm sorry for not doing many live streams lately. I might get back to it. And as I said in the beginning, but I don't think most of you were here, I think that the panel on women went pretty well. So if you have topics you would like to see a panel of women discuss, whether that's modesty or um, anything, let me know, because I think I'd like to put together a few more. I want to say thanks to all of you who have become channel members. I think I have 5 now, and I'm trying to make everything I do free for anyone who benefits from it. But I do appreciate the help, and I'm working on some projects in the background to help promote the channel, to help um, pay for equipment and upgrading of the way I do things around here. But I want to say thank you to everybody for that. And again, sorry to all the homeschoolers out there if you've been waiting for more homeschool content. I haven't forgotten you. I've tried, but hopefully in the coming month or two. But anyway, great to see everybody. Hey, Nicole, blessed feast of Transfiguration if you're on the new calendar. Blessed feast of St. Christina if you're on the old. So, all right, everyone, take care. We'll talk to you later.